Broad Kuivila.
That was aggressive. That clarity and brevity. I won't be so clear, nor will it be so clear. Well, this is a way it's spinning off a little bit of what Mark was talking about and thinking about in the panel earlier today. Way back when I first got out of graduate school, I had a funny artist residency in an elementary school in Buffalo, New York. And it's kind of appropriate, actually, because this piece is a little bit about that time that we'll be performing tonight. And what I had to do was, in some way, figure out how to have these kids at this magnet school make art. Okay? And after really thrashing for a long time, they could do things and get them to do things. I feel like, God, I'm just imposing my own sick idea, and these are just these kids. What I realized is, what I said is, okay, all I want you to do is this. You guys just play. But you're going to play with this video camera on, and you have to play in a way that will be interesting to your friends to watch. Okay? And I felt like I had cracked the problem, because I can put anything into that context about art. Because art making is self-conscious play. Right? That's basically what we're on about. Now, when it comes to notation, in relation to this, there's the sense of, well, who are you projecting this to? Somehow, when in our conversations about notation, we imagine these as universal rather than targeted, but they're always targeted. Whether it's to a trained musician or to a very good friend who's going to play a piece. And the construction of that other who's going to complete it is probably where contemporary music is really lacking. Which is to say, we don't have a pedagogical music. There are great pedagogical pieces. I was thinking, Rainforest, Cobra, two examples that I use all the time in classes because they teach people about this kind of work. For 1, 2, or 3 people, the sonic meditations, great examples of work of that sort, where you can learn about this music. The interesting thing about all of those pieces is they require a cohort, they require ensembles. Okay? Yet there's this huge cultural pattern of wanting to get individual mastery on an instrument. Okay? And I think this is, in terms of notation, probably the great unaddressed problem for us as composers in relation to the culture. That if we could find a way forward that took that challenge on, we could actually have a much greater impact on helping the rest of our community in reimagining how musical culture works. This is, for example, this is the great contribution of Marie Schaefer. The sound walk is an incredible teaching device. Okay? And it's one that it can be a self-teaching. And there's even the possibility of feeling some level of mastery, I suppose. And then there's this question of thwarting the need for mastery, if you will. I was thinking in terms of the game pieces of Cage's Inlets, where of course the whole point is it's this instrument that you can't master. You try to make a sloshing sound in a conch shell filled with water, you never know when it's going to happen. So there's a game where you have to push through on your own will to sound rather than feeling that success. Well, that whole paradox, that whole sight, I think is one of the great interesting sites for music. And what I think in relation to notation, I'm thinking more and more about YouTube. Okay? Because the reality is we have a whole series of self-starting, emerging notational forms in mass culture. Whether it's learning how to play congas from somebody's home YouTube tape or what have you. There are all these other ways in which we manifest intention. Any computer program for audio is a great big notation. We know that it comprises a theory of sound. Okay? Where the only way right now I can imagine organizing an effort in relation to that is in terms of who you're keeping interested in. Who are your friends, right, when you're playing? And I think that might be the salient feature of where we might have creative enterprise in the future. Now, of course, this is all introducing the piece, and the piece was actually a piece I made as an undergraduate. It's different, but it's completely based on it. And it was a piece that I could talk about in greater detail, but I'll simply say the goal of it, as it says in the program note, was to make a piece that could be performed by an enormous chorus that never rehearsed together but rehearsed in small groups. Okay, that the initial version was not that, and actually was about something entirely different. After I made the piece, I realized that would be the interesting thing to do, and never did it. And then thinking about this with vocal constructors, I said, that was a good idea. I should think about it again. And the difference is, in the previous case, what singers sang were simply phonemes from the International Phonetic Alphabet. And the problem with that is there's no closure, and there's a way in which you can only not know how to use them. It was an unnecessary distraction. And so instead I wanted to use a text where you would sing only the sustainable phonemes. And I took this text from Morton Feldman because all these issues came up in June in Buffalo back in, I don't know when it was, 1975 or 76.
Thank you, Ron. That was pretty good, actually. We're almost back on schedule. Christian Wolff, it's wonderful having you back on this campus. Welcome. Tell us about notation.
Nice to be here. Well, I'll try to be succinct too if I can. These are just odd things that pop in my head as I've been listening to people. I was thinking, first of all, my first encounter with notation. And I was supposed to take piano lessons, and I had to learn how to read music, which meant one very specific thing, which is to be able to figure out what those notes were on the stage and what the duration of that notation were about. And then I was thinking about my first Pauline, where I started, and then eventually I started to compose using notation that I learned how to read music. I was trying to think of when I first did not use that standard notation. And it was actually quite early on. And like Pauline's case, it was for a vocal piece. It's actually called Madrigals. It's for three voices. And I used only a single line, which indicated basically melodic movement. And each singer got to choose whatever pitch they wanted, but they had to move either above the line, higher, on the line, reference note, below the line, lower. And that was it. That was in three parts. And then I was trying to think, where did that idea come from? Actually it came from two reasons. One is, I was interested in the rhythmic structure of that piece, and I knew that singing has a particular, I like piano, where you don't have to worry about the pitches. You play the note and hope the piano's in tune. If it isn't, there's nothing you can do about it. But when you're singing, the issue of finding the pitches is not so difficult. If you're particularly expert in that. It's not such a self-evident thing. And in this case, I thought to get rid of that issue, I would simply let singers choose their own pitches, and therefore put it on one, and then put this other alternative in so-called indeterminate notation. So that came about from, let's say, for a practical reason, and simply to make it easier for the singers to sing, and yet for me to make the musical structure I at that point wanted to make. And the idea, I think, came from, as a pianist, I saw, standard items, pop conventions and stuff like that. But I had also been starting to look at other music, and we're talking, this is a long time ago. We're about 1949, 1950. I was a teenager at the time. And I saw for the first time a percussion score by Rice's ionization. And lo and behold, there were no staves. There were only single lines for the percussion instruments. I think that might have triggered the notion of doing that for vocalists. Okay, that's one kind of thing. Then another reason for using alternative notation, those are, you might say, pragmatic, but I think now and also earlier, a lot of the notation we talk about have to do with prose instructions, or they're alternative notations, but then invariably, not invariably, but very often, you might say they're simpler than learning how to read music. Even like something like for 1, 2, or 3 people, it's not a simple piece really, but actually the notation is not that difficult. And the other important point is that anybody can learn it. Even folks who can read music. And the reason for that is to make the music accessible to people who don't read music, which might include non-professional students who have got around reading music, or even those musicians who are highly professional musicians but happen not to read. I recently worked with Joe Barron, a wonderful drummer. He doesn't read. And I wanted to put him in a piece, and I had to write this part, and I had a very unusual, I had to figure out how to do that in such a way that we could do his thing, or play the music that I read. Okay, I have just one other thing, which is, I grew up in an analog world, and I've had problems ever since adjusting to digital. And I'll mention just two things that, one occurred to me right as Michael and I were walking over here, and that has to do, now we get to notation as such. We noticed, I just thought of what happens when handwritten notation is transferred digitally to what I guess they call engraving method, probably, but you do it through the computer. And I was thinking of the Feldman early piano music, which Peters then much later put out in an engraved form. And when I first saw that, I thought, that's not what it was. I had the old, originally they were distributed, actually also by his first publisher, Peters, in photocopies of his handwritten scores. And I found it very difficult to read those pieces from the digital engraved notation. It just didn't feel right. It didn't seem like and a couple of other composers, we thought of Howard Skempton, one of which was a similar experience. And then I thought also of Satie's Vexations, which most of us, when we played it, we had that photocopy in Satie's own hand. And those of you who are involved in that piece probably know that, but you can also obviously now get it in some printed editions of Satie. And again, it doesn't quite right, and it doesn't feel quite right when you're playing it. I still have the memory of doing that for the first time and struggling, not only through the way he spells the notes, which drive me crazy, but also you have to deal with his actually quite beautiful, elegant hand, but that too affects the way you actually play. Okay. And one last point, and that has to do with so younger folks seem to compose on the computer. And that seems to me, again, it's obviously extremely convenient. And Cage, actually, in the whole last few years of his life, produced this enormous quantity of music which he never had done if he didn't have those computer programs to work with. I think in some of those pieces he must have taken about 20 minutes to make them. And the computer did the rest, and provided him with the music ready to play. It's unbelievably efficient. And he wrote about 40 pieces in a year and a half or something. Very efficient. However, there are issues there, which is one, that there are things that you can't do on the computer. There are notions that were simply not. You might be able to do enormous amounts of ingenuity and so forth, but in fact the computer does limit to what you might think of doing as a composer, because you just can't notate it. You can't do it in that particular form. Okay, that's it.
Thank you, Christian. A lot to think about right there. And Michael Parsons is our last presenter.